Christ is risen. Welcome to Spiritual Calisthenics. Today, on May 15th, we celebrate a number of things. In addition to the Sunday of the Paralytic, we are also celebrating St. Achillius, the Bishop of Larissa, as well as St. Pachomius the Great martyr. St. Pachomius was born of pagan parents in Upper Thebed of Egypt. He was conscripted into the Roman army at an early age. While quartered with the other soldiers in the prison of Thebes, Pachomius was astonished at the kindness shown them by the local Christians, who relieved their distress by bringing them food and drink. Upon acquiring who they were, he believed in Christ and vowed that once delivered from the army, he would serve him all the days of his life. Released from military service about the year 313, he was baptized and became a disciple of the hermit Palamon, under whose exact guidance he increased in virtue and grace, and reached such a height of holiness that because of the purity of his heart, says his biographer, he was, as it were, seeing the invisible God in a mirror. His renown spread far, and so many came to him to be his disciples that he founded 9 monasteries in all, filled with many thousands of monks, to whom he gave the rule of life, which became the pattern for all communal monasticism after him. While St. Anthony the Great is the father of hermits, St. Pachomius is the founder of the Cenobitic life in Egypt. Because Pachomius had founded a way of monasticism accessible to so many, Anthony said that he walks the way of the apostles. St. Pachomius fell asleep in the Lord before his contemporaries Anthony and Athanasius the Great in the year 346. His name in Coptic, Pachom, means eagle. Thou didst prove a chief pastor of the chief shepherd Christ, guiding the flocks of monastics unto the heavenly fold, whence thou learnest of the habit of the ways of life that both befit ascetic ranks. Having taught this to thy monks, thou now dancest and rejoicest with them in heavenly dwellings, O great Pachomius, our father and guide. So St. Pachomius is the father of the Cenobitic lifestyle for monks. St. Achillius, the Bishop of Larissa, was one of the 318 God-bearing fathers who was present at the First Ecumenical Council. After returning to Larissa, he cast down many pagan temples, delivered many from demons, and raised up churches to the glory of God. He reposed about the middle of the 4th century. O model of faith and the image of gentleness, the example of your life has shown you forth to your sheepfold to be a master of temperance. You obtained thus through being lowly gifts from on high and riches through poverty. Achilles, our father and priest of priests, intercede with Christ our God, that he may save our souls. And a very special Croniopola to Father Achilles Carafanos, one of the priests of our metropolis. In the Acts of the Apostles for today, in those days as Peter went here and there among them all, he came down to the saint that lived in Lydda. There he found a man named Aeneas, who had been bedridden for 8 years and was paralyzed. And Peter said to him, Aeneas, Jesus Christ heals you. Rise and make your bed. And immediately he rose, and all the residents of Lydda and Sharon saw him, and they turned to the Lord. Now there was at Joppa a disciple named Tabitha, which means Dorcas. She was full of good works and acts of charity. In those days she fell sick and died. And when they had washed her, they laid her in the upper room. Since Lydda was near Joppa, these disciples, hearing that Peter were there, sent 2 men to him, entreating him, Please come to us without delay. So Peter rose and went with them. And when he had come, they took him to the upper room. All the widows stood beside him weeping and showing tunics and other garments which Dorcas made while she was with them. So in other words, Dorcas was not just the leader of the community, but she attended for people. She made clothes for them. But Peter put them all outside and knelt down and prayed. Then turning to the body, said, Tabitha, rise. She opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. And he gave her his hand and lifted her up. Then calling the saints and widows, he presented her alive, and it became known throughout all Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. Now, there's 2 miracles that take place here, of course, the rising of the dead, but also the healing of the paralytic. And so this is showing us what Jesus Christ had said to Nathanael, you will see greater things than these. You will be able to do the things that I do. So, in other words, Jesus Christ raised people from the dead. His disciples now can raise people from the dead. Jesus Christ cured paralysis. His disciples can cure paralysis. And the reason why this is important here is to understand, what does it mean? Why is this important? Because we see that Tabitha is alive through her works, and so she is brought back to life. And we see that paralysis is not the paralysis of the physical body, but the paralysis of the soul that is causing us to be held back. So let's go into the gospel, because it's a very important gospel. At that time, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Hebrew called Bethesda, which has 5 porticos. In this lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool and troubled the water. Whoever stepped in first after the troubling of the water was healed of whatever disease he had. So it's kind of like a sit back, but more so because obviously, to be healed of these great infirmities is a big deal. One man there who had been ill for 38 years. Now imagine that, 38 years. I mean, for me, I'm 40 years old. That's almost my entire life. When Jesus saw him and knew that he had been lying there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" Now, this is interesting because oftentimes we see the opposite. Jesus Christ is walking and people come to him, imploring him, "Heal me." But Jesus Christ asks this man that is paralyzed, "Do you want to be healed?" Now, this is important because the man who is paralyzed is not just his physical paralysis. It's the idea that he is spiritually paralyzed. And so God, in his love and his compassion, he comes to us. He reaches his hand out and says, "Do you want to be healed?" He's giving him the opportunity. The sick man answered, "Sir, I have no man to put me in the pool when the water is troubled, and while I am going, another steps down before me." Now, this is a double entendre here that is very, very troubling. On the one hand, we see something good. The man he's got a lot of faith. He doesn't give up. He keeps trying. I mean, he's been there for a long time, and he continues to try and get into that pool no matter what. But on the other hand, he has no one to help him. And this is problematic because in Christianity is about community. It's about us all being together. And so this man saying, "I have no one to help me," why does he have no one to help him? Why is there no one that is present to help him? The unspoken thing is possibly that he's pushed them away. And that oftentimes is what leads us to our paralysis, that we've rejected all the help that was coming to us. Jesus said to him, "Rise, take up your pallet and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his pallet and walked. Now that day was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who was cured, "It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your pallet." But he answered them, "The man who healed me said to me, 'Take up your pallet and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who said this to you? Take up your pallet and walk." Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, as there was a crowd in the place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse befall you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. Now, this can be taken a number of different ways. First and foremost, Jesus Christ tells the man, "Take up your pallet and walk." So he immediately heals him, showing that he is going to come into that man's life to take him out of the paralysis. Second, the man gets up and does not ask, "Who are you, that I may worship you?" He just does what Jesus Christ says. He takes up the pallet and walks. Again, it's almost this lonely existence, if we take this certain interpretation. But, and again, this character is full of dichotomy here, because although he seems to be off the path, where does Jesus find him? In the temple, which is where he should be. He should be in the temple because he's glorifying and thanking God. But then Jesus Christ says something very curious. He says, "See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse befall you." Now, this is very, very cryptic and very, very telling. He's been paralyzed for 38 years. Again, that's a long time, and that's a hard, hard life. Not a lot that you could imagine that would be worse than that. It also tells us something of the nature of why the man was paralyzed in the first place. Sin no more, lest something worse befall you. In other words, sin caused this. If you sin again, it could be even worse. Now, this is a interpretation that looks at this in this way because it is going to be juxtaposed with the man born blind in 2 weeks. Inasmuch as we are going to see that the man born blind, when people asked who sinned, him or his parents, that he was born blind, Jesus Christ will say neither. It was for the glory of God. There is nothing being said here. Here we are seeing the straight deuteronomical understanding of suffering, that this man must have done something. And that was why he was paralyzed. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, nothing really, because we should not try to interpret why anyone is suffering, other than to pray for that person or to pray for ourselves. that God can help us. But what is important here is to understand that Christ heals our paralysis, that this is symbolic of baptism, because this is all about water. The water of baptism, which is rebirth, it allows us to live again. And this is why the epistle was paired with this, because Tabitha lives again, that through baptism we are alive. And this is what is being meant to be conveyed here, is that through Christ, through the waters of baptism, through our new existence, we are alive. I hope that you've enjoyed today's spiritual calisthenics. Have a blessed and wonderful day. Christos Anesti.